Right, well, welcome everyone. Over here. All right. Okay. All right, everyone, welcome. Before we jump into our topic tonight, what's under the hood of an ebook, a few housekeeping items. First, my name is Amanda Vale. I am the president of the board right now. And I'd like any other board members who are here to just stand up and introduce themselves real quickly. If you're interested in the board at all and what we do or about the guild, feel free to get in touch with any one of us. So, who's first?
I'm Rebecca.
Hi, I'm Rebecca.
I am Jennifer Gager.
All right. Excellent. A couple of other little housekeeping things. So we are live streaming this meeting tonight. You can find it at youtube.com/user/edsguild. You can also tweet with us at edsguild or hashtag edsguild. Find us on Facebook if you like. And of course, there is our website there as well. So other announcements. Our next member meeting is Sunday, not the typical Monday night. September 7th, 4 to 7 p.m. It'll be in downtown Seattle. It's our annual member potluck. I encourage you all to attend. We'll be posting details and sending it out to the listserv in the coming weeks, so we'll have the exact address for you. Also, we are actively recruiting for the 2015 to 2016 board. If you're interested in being on the board, please feel free to, again, ask questions of any board members. We're happy to talk about what we do. Also, you can email me at president@edsguild.org. I'm happy to get back to you and chat with you at all. You can go to coffee if you like. So, just want to put that out there. Also, it's not limited by proximity to Seattle. Our board is currently heavily based in Seattle, but we do have option to connect electronically. So attendance at board meetings could be done over the phone, be done over Skype. So if you're in Portland, if you're in Spokane, if you're anywhere else and can't make it into Seattle for a board meeting, don't rule yourself out. All right, so without further ado, I will introduce our speakers. Julie Klein is an editor and proofreader specializing in narrative, nonfiction, and fiction. She's excited to now offer ebook development to her colleagues and clients. Marcella has a background in web content production, including graphic design, blogging, and community engagement via social media. She's taking an ebook formatting and publishing to coincide with the release of the book, Fallout from the Workforce, at the end of 2014. All right, let you two take over. Thanks.
Hello, thanks for coming. So this is about what's under the hood of an ebook. Back in late 2013, an editor in the group posts that she was looking for someone to format ebooks and got several recommendations, and none of them were members of the board. So I started thinking, what's wrong with this picture? Why aren't we doing this for our clients and our other members? So here's what happened then. Start date, January 20th. I put a call out on the listserv and created a Yahoo group for interested members, and we met at Panera Bread on that date, on January 20th in Capitol Hill, to discuss what we wanted to learn about ebook formatting. Some people were interested in just the changing technology. Some people, like myself, wanted to actually learn how to do it. A couple weeks later, start date February 5th, we had our first study session at Cornish, thanks to B. Tangseret. Is that how you say it? Does anybody know? Is that how you say it? Ms. Tangseret? She got us set up at Cornish, and we had our first meeting. Two sessions later, with Bob Sheldon as our guide on March 5th, we successfully formatted an ebook in Word to upload into Smashwords and Mobi. And I need to acknowledge Bob because he donated his book that he basically took the Smashwords manual and parsed it down into very understandable steps. That was excellent. I mean, and he gave us all copies so that we could use it for ourselves. Does everybody know what Smashwords is? Not really. Smashwords is an ebook platform. It's an opportunity for authors to publish inexpensively and to capture a certain amount of royalties. They can offer their books for free. They can offer their books for, I'm not sure what the range is, but depending on the arrangements they make with Smashwords, I understand they get a certain percentage of royalties. And please correct me. If you know something differently, please correct me, because there's so much to learn and so much to remember about everything we're talking about tonight. At any rate, with Bob's help, we got it done. We uploaded 2 Smashwords. This is the book we used. Well, not the whole book. We used a few short stories from the Grimm Fairy Tales, from Project Gutenberg. We started with a source document. That's what it looks like. You can tell there's different colors in the middle, and there's really no formatting to speak of, other than it's justified, right? Justified. Mm-hmm. So the first things we did was to create in styles, and I'll show you a picture of styles. Does anybody use styles? People have used styles? Yeah. There's the styles feature. First thing we did was clear all the formatting. The next thing we did was create a normal for us to base everything off of. And we created other styles, such as first paragraph, which typically goes all the way to the left, and then the paragraphs that follow are slightly indented. There are headings that are typically centered. There are quotes. You might, for example, in the previous screen, you see there's quotes. How do you format that? We had to make those decisions. Mm-hmm. And then, as Bob instructed us, we had to create 2 paragraph marks before and after each page break. And there's an example of how you create paragraph styles. So that's our first line of the regular graph. This is our normal setting, so that you've got the first line is 0.25 because ebooks don't want to have a huge indentation. Single spaced, pretty much right there, and it's so much easier. If you've never used styles, I suggest you do some training in it with lynda.com or something like that. I took about 3.5 hours of styles training in Lynda, and it was very helpful. I use it in my day job all the time now. And there's what the text looks like after we format it, the same text you looked at before. This is not the first graph, so otherwise it would be all the way to the left. This is just pulling the sample of what we did. After that, you need to insert front matter. This is specifically for Smashwords and Moby. And I took it from Bob's book, so that was the easiest thing to do. Then we created a table of contents. And what you do is like anchors.
Anchor tags.
You create anchor tags around the heading, and then you go back and you create, I can't remember the steps specifically off the top of my head, but I could read it to you if you want, but no, it's not that important. So, but you create a table of contents. Someone wants to read Mother Holly instead of Hansel and Gretel. You click on the table of contents, the title, and you go to that chapter instead. The most popular e-reading devices, as most of you probably know, I'm sure everyone's got an iPad or a Kindle, Nook, Kobo. Does anybody not have an e-reading device?
Not yet.
Not yet, keyword. You can read on your smartphone, you can read on your desktop. There's so many ways to read an ebook now. And these are the platforms they use. They use Mobi, they use EPUB, which is the most generic, and they use iBooks and PDF, and I believe there's some other options too. So there's a breakdown of the Smashwords conversion. You upload your Word document, it goes through what's called the meat grinder, and it goes out into those different reading platforms. Where did you find the slide?
I grabbed it right off of Mark Coker's
Okay.
YouTube video.
So you think, well, Smashwords does it all. Well, there's some limitations. I learned that I bought a book directly from a publisher, and I bought it in Mobi format. And I thought, cool, it's going to work just like Kindle. Not true. For one thing, I could only read it on my Kindle. My partner couldn't read it. I could not put it on I couldn't put it on my tablet, for example. I couldn't put it on my smartphone. And I couldn't put it in the Kindle Lending Library. I like my Kindle, and I like getting books from Amazon, although through this whole process, I've tried different ways to go about it, and I still like the Kindle platform the best, but that's just me. But if you publish with Smashwords Premium, you can download a book to all available platforms. And once you download to, for example, EPUB, you can download EPUB to your various platforms. So that's something I didn't know. If I had perhaps bought this book from Smashwords instead of from the publisher, I probably would have had more flexibility with how I'm going to read it. What if you want to add images with your ebook? Or what if you have something more academic and want to use tables or endnotes? What if you have an index? What if you want to embed audio and video? Does Smashwords work like that? I think there's some limitations. So then what happened? Start date March 24th. There was the three-way mingle with Ed's Guild and BPNW and Seattle Writer Girls. And Marcella and I came face to face and we said, you know what? We're just scratching the surface. So the next thing we did was we met over coffee. And we decided to figure out how we were going to do this, because we wanted to learn more. And 2 weeks later, we got to work. We started meeting every other week, and then we realized that we weren't moving fast enough. We started meeting every week, and I have every other Wednesday off. We were meeting every other Wednesday. So basically, I had no life other than work and doing this, because I really wanted to learn it. And I knew we had, and then I knew we had to present in July. But we did it. After about 2.5 months, we used this guy's book, Paul Salvet, as a how-to manual. We used his website templates and any other resources we could find. And we created both an EPUB book and a Kindle book. And here's what Paul Salvet says. The written word is far too important to just haphazardly convert with a magical software program into an ebook. A beautiful ebook requires professionals in the publishing business and authors to acquire technical knowledge, namely HTML, CSS, and XML. To understand why it is essential that you don't convert ebooks directly from your word processing software into an ebook format, ebooks have to be envisioned completely differently than regular documents. Is this where you put that?
I could.
I think it is. And now I turn it over to Marcella.
Okay. So at that point, We took our perfectly formatted Word document as our source document, and we knew that we had to put it all into one monster-sized HTML file that looks good in a web browser. So in order to do that, you need to use a text editor. We used Notepad++, but you could use Dreamweaver or any other kind that is your preference. And so how you have to prep to get there is you get rid of all your excess white space. That means p-tag, pilcrows that don't belong in there, line breaks, and everything will be wrapped in paragraph tags, p-tags, to prevent your text from becoming unformatted, so that your paragraphs stay as paragraphs and they don't have errant lines of text going where they don't belong. And on top of that, so you've got your basic HTML, and then you have to also style things in terms of placement and position on every individual page. And you do that by creating styles in the text editor. And you have to have one for EPUB, which is the generic file across many different platforms, and then Mobi, which is the file format specific to all Amazon products, all Kindle, all the different versions of Kindle. So then, once you've got that, I'm trying to make this as granular and still understandable as possible. So you've got one huge book-length HTML file, which is wonderful, but now you want to create your table of contents and your clickable chapter-by-chapter reference to it. So you have to, best practice is to separate according to your chapter headings and chapter length. For two reasons. The reading device will parse your HTML files easily, knowing, it doesn't know anything, but easier and quicker with your HTML files divided per chapter. So that's load time and memory as well. So another best practice is labeling your files in linear order, chapters 1 through 10, for example, fairly obvious, because each one of these files is going to be referenced in the folder that contains the Uber, we call it an EPUB package, because that's exactly what it is. It's a package of files that has to be called out and put together in a very specific way, and it is a completely unforgiving thing, as you will see. So this essentially is the file directory structure of either an EPUB or a Mobi. You've got a 20-character file called a MIME type that simply says publication plus zip, and I'll tell you what zip is all about in a minute. And you have container.xml. These are just labels for types of data. That's really all it is. And then in the one in the middle on the upper one where it says OEBPS, that's where you have your cluster of individual chapter files. You've got your table of content file, and you've got your cover image for your book. Now, I think at this point, I'll mention that included in this, you'll have two tables of contents. The HTML table of contents, as well as a file called toc.ncx. And NCX is navigational chapter, yeah, XML, exactly, thank you. And then you have folders that have all your image assets. You've got a folder for your style sheets. And, oh, I said that wrong. Okay, so the content folder is the one that has your individual chapter HTML. The OEBPS is kind of the uber one. You'll see what I mean. So at this point, the first thing anyone will probably see is your cover page JPEG. And in thumbnail presentation, as well as the first thing that they click on when they open your book. And I discovered there's a ton of sort of conflicting information about the size of your cover page image. And so I thought it would be worth it to mention something about pixel dimensions in terms of how they relate to reading devices. And as you know, there are multitudes. So the Kindle Fire screen has a particular viewport size at a particular resolution. And then an iPad is completely different. Lovely, right? So what Amazon tells you to do in terms of loading your cover page image is to give it a 1600 by 2560 pixel dimension, width to height. And if you have any internal images, they shouldn't be any larger than the viewport of the smallest device, and that's a 500 by 700. So I'll get back to the last point in a minute here. So for people who aren't graphics gurus, this is a little just a side tangent, but it's an important tangent, because if you're used to what you've been told about web browsers and images in relation to web browsers, you're in a different world now. So the image size dialog box on the left from Photoshop shows you the width and height of your pixels if your resolution was 72 pixels per inch. And so it's about 1005 by 1230. But if you increase the resolution to 300, which is what a lot of the e-reading gurus will tell you to do, you'll see that the width and height of your pixel dimension grows vastly, by 4 times as much. Okay, so. But as you look, this is a really good graphic to just let you know that essentially the same width and height dimension, you can, from the smallest to the largest, whether you go from a handheld device to a tablet, for example, it's pretty much the same ratio. And I just discovered this, I pulled this from a discussion forum on Kindle Direct Publishing just the other day. And it really helped put the whole cover page image, how big should my JPEG be, conversation to rest. And so, what I think is most important, so yeah, you have to have a huge pixel dimension size, I should say. But another important feature is the width to height ratio. So Amazon will tell you one thing, and in fact, the text there in purple is what I experienced myself. I did exactly what they said. I loaded my cover page JPEG to the specified pixel dimension, and then when I looked at it in the Kindle previewer, it looked like it was a little smushed in the width dimension. And I thought, well, that's weird. They're telling me to do one thing, but it doesn't look really good. And so the bottom comment there, especially in red, and I haven't tested this out yet, but I'll bet you anything it makes a lot of sense. He actually added greater width to the pixels that he uploaded. This was some guy named Mike Beach. And the comment was just posted April 2014, so it's a relatively recent comment. And so the ratio is about 6:9, and in a typical printed paperback, that's kind of what it is. So to get that same look and feel, these are the dimensions you'd want to use for your cover page image at a fairly high resolution, higher than what you would, in web browsers, they always tell you, oh, use low-res images because they'll load faster, and that was, turn of the century advice. But e-readers are not web browsers, even though they're based on very similar technology. So that's the point there. So on back to the text. So you've got the EPUB file format for for Sony, for Stanza, for Kobo, all these other platforms. But the one called Mobi is specifically for Amazon-produced reading devices. And I know that you can't see it all that well. But these are cascading style sheet lines of code. And this is where the real beauty of it happens. This is what creates where and how the lines of text on every single page of your ebook, how it flows, how it reflows, where it separates. Everything is created in these lines of code. So on the right there, my little rough arrow pointing to one of the things, it says span drop cap. And those are just lines of code to if you wanted to create a drop cap for the very beginning line of one of your paragraphs. But you notice, if you can read it, I'll just tell you what it says. At the top there in green it says Kindle Fire 8 specific here. And then in the bottom one, you've got one that is specific to an older version of a Kindle device. But you can use the same line of, the same classification for your span tag. And because you've got this style sheet attached in that Uber folder that's part of your package, it will pick up and read whatever is specific to that e-reading device. And then we're going to code like it's 1995. This is a snapshot of command prompt lines of code. And so you've got all your beautiful HTML files, you've got your JPEGs, you've got your table of contents, you've got everything ready to go, and then you have to do this. And you have to zip all the results into one folder, which contains the MIME type, which is just that label for the type of data, the container.xml, which tells it this is what tells the reader what it's going to read. And so 20 characters of one line of code called the MIME type has to go in there first, and it's not compressed. But all the other files are. So every individual chapter 1, chapter 2, .html, it's all listed there. All your images, your cover page, your table of contents. And then, maybe this should reverse the order here next time. Anyway, part of, that's right, it's so much fun. So once you've zipped your file, this really should have gone before, but next time. So this is, I'll tell you why I did it this way. Once you've got everything together, you still have to validate it to make sure that your lovely files don't get rejected by uploading it to Kindle or Smashwords or any other. Whenever you upload, it just has to be presented in a very specific way. So where you are most likely to encounter errors in your coding is in this particular section of this file called content.opf. And essentially, so you've got your folder and you've got your lovely chapter HTML files, but then they also have to have ID tags that identify them in all these other areas of the folder that are reading them. And I did some crude underlining just to show that you have to have an ID reference for every single piece. Your style sheets, all your images, both versions of your table of contents.
There was head banging.
Much head banging, yes. Oops, no, go back. There we go. So table of contents as an HTML and table of contents that will be read by the reading device. That's why it's a navigational chapter XML. And the NCX file has to be in a linear play order. Chapters 1 through whatever. But it has to be very specific, and all the names of everything that you've given, you've called chapter 1, blah, blah, blah. It has to be called out in exactly the same way in this file as well. Because if there's any, and I mean any deviation, an extra space, the missing comma, whatever, you will have to find it and correct it. Because if you don't, you will never get to this point. This, I don't call it the Holy Grail lightly, because the first few times we ran our nicely zipped files through the EPUB validator, you often get a list of all kinds of errors. And many typical errors are, oh, you called this out in the manifest, but we don't know what it relates to in the table of contents. Or we see that this is, in fact, in the zip file, but what does it relate to? We don't know. Or it will claim that something is missing. And so you have to go through and laboriously make sure that you have done every single, anyway, take my word for it. So when you see, congratulations, no problems were found in your blah, blah, blah.epub, man, it's a happy day. So as I mentioned, the Mobi format is for all things Amazon, and EPUB is everyone else. So a word about how, in fact, they differ. Let me see. So for one thing, they take different style sheets. Because, Kindle has been out there for a while now, so there, I think, are at least half a dozen different versions. There's Paperwhite, there's e-ink, there's Kindle Fire. 3 versions of Kindle Fire are on the market already. So thankfully, at least, Amazon tries to make it easier for you by creating Kindle Gen for generator, through their free downloadable Kindle Previewer. And it will, convert your EPUB to a Mobi, and Mobi is the one that Amazon uses. I think I covered everything. Let me know if I didn't, okay? If I didn't cover everything. Yes, thank goodness for Kindle Previewer, because it comes with Kindle Gen. And here's the thing, it creates a much larger package than your EPUB, because it's creating a version of your Mobi for every different Kindle device out there, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. And this will make all the previous comments about style differences in images crystal clear. Ta-da! So, as you can see, the one on the far left is for Kindle Fire, the one in the middle is Kindle Fire HDX, and the third one on the right there is for Kindle Fire HDX 8.9, which refers to the height of the actual device. Now, my text doesn't wrap around the image. The image is seen as a block element in the vernacular. And you notice how the images, that's the same image, but it's rendered differently through each version of the Kindle. That's just the way of it. You know, you can't be surprised. And I couldn't honestly tell you at this point how you would create them differently. I'm sure there's a way. I haven't done it yet. In order for each one of those to be exactly the same size across each version of the Kindle. And here it is. Here's the original EPUB in Adobe Digital Editions. And this I like best because I know for a fact that image size is exactly the one I specified in my code. And you'll see that the text wraps around it quite nicely. So if you were to go on, you know, the chatter out on the internet, you'll find people talking about these kinds of issues all the time about, well, how do I get this to wrap, and why doesn't it look the same on Adobe Digital Editions as it does in my Kindle? And these are things I'm just now grasping with, but I just want to let you know, these are the issues that come up when you're trying to get a product that will at least look good across as many different platforms as possible. And that's really the holy grail. Sure.
So you can see there's a little bit of print and text in blue.
Yes.
That's the anchor.
Good point.
So that's the anchor. So that when you want to go to chapter 3, that's what takes you to chapter 3. That's the connection between the table of contents, chapter 3, and the beginning of chapter 3. Exactly.
So why would you put it in the chapter title, chapter 3? Why would you put it in the
You could. You could. I don't see why you couldn't. It's just an anchor tag.
Yeah.
You can put it. I could have put it in the middle of another paragraph. You know, it's just a link to that table, that precious table of contents. Oh, really? You're kidding? Done already? I can't believe I got through that. Okay, so that sort of gives you just a taste of the kinds of issues you have to deal with in terms of literally going under the hood, correcting code, understanding what relates to what and why and how. And it's really, it comes down to just having beautifully formatted HTML, having great style sheets, that you know what's what. You know, if you want your text to only take up 90% of the width of the viewport, you specify 90%. If you want margins of specific size, every, you know, infinitesimally small thing that you want to actually see, no matter what format or what device that you are using, has to be specified in your style sheets, in the Cascade style sheets. I'm not referring to the word, but I mean, yeah. So you get to this point, and this is kind of a checklist for all the things that you have to, you know, think about along the way as well. So as I mentioned, the thing with images, do they scale well? Correct linear order. You don't want chapter 3 before chapter 1. Paragraphs reflowable. You don't want widows or orphans. So, you know, but the thing is, you also have to keep in mind, style it as best you will, but the reality is, the user has some level of control in terms of, they can make the font size larger or smaller to their own preference. Hyperlinks, whether internal to the book or external, have to go all to the right location. Is your metadata correct? And I didn't really spend a lot of time on talking about metadata, but that would be like author, publisher, description. How is your book most likely to be categorized? Russian literature from the 19th century, from Chechnya or whatever. I mean, you can get as granular as you want to in that. How do the styles look? Do they style the correct content? And does does your EPUB transfer over to a MOBI as well? And I like this quote. Liz Castro has been in the web business for quite some time, and now she's lent her hand to EPUBs. And I found this really to be true, that no matter what, you could use a service like Calibre, Smashwords, Scrivener. There are so many out there. But what it really comes down to is how well your HTML is coded and styled. And the EPUB file format will support pretty much all the most usable styles that that you are likely to see.
One thing we learned by reading Liz Castro's book, though, is she takes a totally different approach than Paul Salvet does. Salvet has you build the ebook from the ground up. Liz Castro, and granted she's doing this for iBooks, I think, more so than...
Right, and she's starting from InDesign.
And she's starting from InDesign, so the first thing she tells you is to unzip the file and go in there and make all these corrections.
Right, and then zip it up.
And then rezip it. And so it's really a matter of what you prefer to do, and for me, I prefer to build it from the ground up because I feel like I have more control.
Yes, it really is all about creative control. I mean, there were many, many times Julie and I would just look at each other and say, now, tell me again, why are we doing this? Because there are definitely services out there that you can use, but, you know, one thing I noticed just the other day, there's no one out there who's claiming that you're going to get perfect results across all e-reading devices. No one makes that claim. You just have to do the best that you can with what you're working with. And so if what you're working with are literally the very basic, the base code, then you're more likely to have the results you actually want, especially when it's connected with understanding how the e-reading devices out there fluctuate and change with how they render things. And you saw in those two slides the Adobe Digital Editions versus the different versions of Kindle. There is a huge variety, and I don't know that you can really escape that. You just have to make it look the best that you can. So it's about creative control. I just kind of stuck this in here, but it all makes sense. I mean, faster time to market, a global distribution, lower expenses, and that the bottom one is truly the best. You know, you can earn more per book. Traditional royalties structures, as you may know, are very different than what, for example, Smashwords would give you.
What is Smashwords?
They take, I think, 15%. So they don't charge you anything to upload your EPUB, but then you're with them. You're, in a sense, sponsored by them, so they take a little cut of your royalties. That's how that works. So, thank you.
So do we have questions, comments, corrections?
How you mentioned the 72 versus the 300
Mm-hmm.
API. I'm used to hearing that like 72 for web and 300 for print.
That's absolutely right, yes.
So the 300, is that what's really recommended for the e-reader?
Pretty much. If you were to, like, for example, if you were to Google that question right now, you would probably get answers ranging from, 170, 200, 300. I've even seen some things on KDP that says 350. So it's,
So why not the 22 for web? Like why the higher?
you know, that's a good question, and it's really, I think, to do with the fact that I'm not sure how this all started in terms of maybe they thought that the readers were always going to be small, but now it has this huge range of something this big to something that's, 6 by 9, and then there are people who will tell you that the pixels per inch doesn't even matter at all. It's just concentrate on the pixel size. And I'm going to put this on the listserv, but I came across a really good discussion of this by an Adobe instructor. Her name's Kari Jansen, and I'll put it on the listserv. But she talks about what the relationship is between PPI and pixel dimension in terms of where you go to get your images, where you grab them, and what sort of finagling you'll have to do to get them to look good in your ebook. Yeah. Yes, wait.
So now, after you guys have learned this, did you decide this is a certain you went offer to clients, or does it just go?
Oh, God bless you, yes. Yes, Chris.
So it seems like you're combining not only editing services, but design services and even programming.
You bet. You got it. Yes, absolutely.
So could you see like a consortium of people, the editing side, the design side, and the programming side working together rather than one person doing it all?
Like
Right.
Because I could not do design to save my life.
Right.
Yeah, and I have strengths that Julie will probably admit she doesn't have. But I like that word consortium because that's really true. I just think it would not be truthful to try to cover all that. That's a lot of territory, and I don't think I would attempt it. But yes, I would do the formatting and converting, no problem. And book cover design. I have a couple of those under my belt, so I feel pretty good at it. Okay. Yes, Rebecca.
So even if you're not physically doing conversions, find that you're approaching your editing differently now that you know how this part of it works.
Well, one thing that we both noticed, since the validating process is so unforgiving, we're thinking, this is really improving our proofreading skills. Because when you have to write, perfect code and it gets rejected when you don't, let me tell you, there's nothing like having your hand swatted to really teach yourself pattern recognition, which is basically what these skills are, I don't have to tell you that. So, yeah. Yes.
Question about the slide about the conversion options.
Oh, yes.
That's like, it'd be nice to see that again, but also I'm just wondering about the DIY tools. Did you use any of those? What were they called?
The D&Y tools?
DIY.
Tools. Like, people just either submit
There.
directly to Smashwords, and you've done I think you were kind of doing number 2, but you were doing it with a
We were doing number 3. So Mark Coker is the founder of Smashwords, and so this I can't take credit for this. I pulled it. I robbed it from his YouTube video. But essentially, you can do it yourself. You can have someone else do it, or you can go through Amazon or Smashwords or any number of third-party software. And the do-it-yourself conversion tools, I can't speak a lot to that. I know about that much InDesign, but a lot of people love starting in InDesign to create an ebook. And I think I will probably dip my toe in there too eventually.
We didn't have time between when we started learning this process and doing this presentation, but that was always on my list to say, now let's put something in Calibri and convert it. Now let's try it with Siegel,
yeah.
and convert it. And, go through the whole process of different options. B actually got a project where she converted a book to ebooks, and she did a bang-up job. I think she started off putting it into Word, but she had to go and look at the HTML and actually do some cleanup. So it's very useful, very helpful to have some HTML experience. And I've learned more than I thought I wanted to know, but it's kind of fun because I'm geared that way, I guess. But, CSS, the style sheets are another matter. I need to study those some more. But Paul Stelvet actually offers you templates. So I didn't have to, we didn't create those from scratch. We copied them. He offers them to his audience, to whoever wants them. And he knows there's people out there developing ebooks off of his templates. And he's very generous. So we probably couldn't have done this by next July if we had to do it by ourselves.
Yeah, oh God, no kidding. Yeah.
My guess would be that all of those tools, if you submit a book to Amazon because you want to convert it to a Kindle, but my guess would be that you just don't have the control that you have.
Exactly.
Under the hood, like you guys were. Like you'll get, like a self-publisher would get, if they could buy a template from a packager, and it will look like every other book, but it won't have the kind of finesse.
Right.
Well, I think there's something to be said for templates, too. In fact, I have a project coming up where I'm going to be transcribing some short stories, and I plan to do it in a template. Because for one thing, that will force me to create one, which I don't think is that hard. And for another thing, there will be a certain standard all along the way for each story.
So when you say template, you mean a Word style sheet?
It's a Word template, yes. We use them at work, and I don't get to create them, I just get to clean them up because they're really crappy. And if I could get my hands in them, but I'm not in that department. Otherwise, I would love to do that because, like I said, that's how I operate.
When you have the style sheets, you can actually count the control of them. It really looks cool because suddenly you realize when you need to have something change the style and it changes everything in the line.
Yep.
That has that style, not going to go different.
And the styles in Word actually work the same way as I've learned. So if you have one normal to start with, and then you decide you want to change one thing, maybe the font, you change it in normal, and it changes all the normal settings in the doc. Anything that's styled as normal in the document.
Yes.
Did you plan on the optical desk recognition at all? So you can the announcement book and it, using
That's on my list.
Yeah, because that is easy.
Yeah.
I didn't do it. But
You have to totally clean it, like that HTML is not like that's very good. Because it's always like, I don't hear it. So I'd be really curious to see when you take the hard copy. Like, how to make those companies.
oh, right.
That's the kind of people that I should read.
So have you gone to where did we get our book from? The original?
Gutenberg.
Pardon me?
Gutenberg.
Gutenberg. Have you gone to Gutenberg
That's right.
and volunteered to do some work with them? And I think that's what they do. I think they scan it to OCR, and then they have volunteers to proofread. Sorry?
Oh, sorry. Oh, no, it's just, yeah.
But I'd like to take it from the first step and tear apart a book that I don't like, because that would give me pleasure. And then scan it and see if I can create electronic text from that. Electronic, regular HTML text or Word text or something like that.
You mean literally hearing?
Yes, I do. I do. I have a book in mind too.
Did you have?
Well, I was just curious, I thought that when you like copy and paste into the text editor, it automatically formatting. Like I kind of imagine when I think about working in a text editor, I just kind of think of just like copying and pasting text directly in there and coding from there. But why is there the whole like word process? For the formatting and then like copying.
And that's true. And there's some things you have to do to preserve, like if you want the italics and the bold, and there were some other features. If you want to preserve them, you wrap them in certain codes. And PulseUp actually takes you through that process too. And then you throw it into a text editor, and it strips everything but those codes.
Exactly. That's.
So, if you have a book, it's a book, and you have blank page, you know, you want to get the reader to, do you do that on Kindle too, or do you get rid of all your blank pages?
There's no correlation between, yeah.
Kindle's totally flowable. I don't think it will allow you to have a blank page.
Yeah, exactly. Good point. Thank you for what she said.
There are no pages, like, there are no pages. There's no place for it to be free.
Right.
Because then she might be this bigger than this.
But you could probably in hard code return, right?
That's what it's overdone for.
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah. That's true.
And what about, small tabs? Could
You can style for that.
That's right. This is the style sheet.
Mm-hmm. Instruction?
Yeah.
Sure, why not?
You learn by teaching.
That's right. That's right. Because it definitely is not worth getting frustrated about. But it's, so you do, if you want to learn this, it's going to take a little, you know, just getting to the point where you've zipped your files into a folder, you've got it validated, and you're upload ready. And thank goodness Amazon created Kindle Previewer, because I don't know how you would know what your end result was without it. So.
I can tell you too that I would not have wanted to go through this process alone. And so I put a notice on the listserv one day when I had a Wednesday off, and I asked if anybody wanted to get together and start sort of working through the process of learning this from scratch. And I got an email from Marcella, and I'll never forget this. She goes, "I have wheels, I have time, I'm all in." And that's what I needed to hear. And she's been a really great partner to learn this together, to learn this with.
You wanted your ebook to come out in all different formats, and you want some control, which one would you recommend? Would you put it into an EPUB and then hire someone else to complete the next steps, or would you do
To convert it to Mobi?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
or
a
would you do
fairly,
PDF, or is it EPUB that you would do first? and then-
yes, yes.
I think EPUB handles them all. I mean, if you put it in, you can get the Smashwords premium package when you're an author, and it will upload to Mobi, it'll upload to PDF, it'll upload, and there's no limit, it doesn't work quite like Kindle in the sense of sharing on 3 different devices, but you can upload the EPUB to, I've got like one book uploaded to my computer and my laptop and my tablet. The same book. I paid for it, I can do that. Whether I can do it, does anybody know, can you do that with different formats, or do you have to stick with one format? I don't know the answer to that, I haven't tried it out.
I can read Kindle on my iPad, the Kindle app.
With the Kindle,
The other side.
but I mean with Smashwords.
I mean, if you go to Smashwords and buy a file, you get it in a specific format for a specific device.
If you pick one format and you can upload that to, say, 3 different places, can you also take the same book and upload it to your Kindle device that's not necessarily going to read an EPUB? That's what I don't know. I'll try that, though.
Yes.
So, if you don't want to do it yourself, then is your recommendation that you would hire someone and ask them to do it for Kindle and all the others? Or that you find someone who does all of them, or do you go with someone else?
You don't need two separate, no, because the one way to think of it is it all starts as the EPUB, and then the Mobi, the Amazon version, is kind of just a subset, but it's, 90% of it's the same, but Mobi is for all the specifications for Kindle devices. Anything else to say about that?
Well, I think what you're asking is, do you have to hire 2 different people to do the EPUB? One person to do the EPUB and one person to do the Mobi? No.
No, not at all.
One person should be able to do both.
Exactly.
Last question. So who is like looking for someone with like an e-book conversion? So there's like, if there are these automated processes out there, like who, if I imagine someone and they have like a book that they wrote, and they'll just try to do like an automated. Or how, like, who's looking for someone who can do.
I wish I knew the answer to that because I'd like to find those people, but I know they're out there because I think there's been enough. I mean, I can't really speak to this. I don't even actually own a Kindle, but I read Adobe Digital Edition books on my laptop. I think the quality is erratic, and maybe that's why this learning from the ground up even exists at all, because there aren't a lot of standards that are adhered to. Who knows what Amazon is going to decide to do next? And people producing ebooks just kind of have to march along with the company that has the largest market. There's basically Amazon, and then there's everyone else. Everyone else is EPUB, thank goodness. But then you have to, to have the widest coverage, you have to have parallel coverage.
And I don't know if it's really automated, just to mention Smashwords, because I downloaded a 57-page manual about what you have to do to your file before you submit.
Right.
That is not automated.
Exactly.
Which is why Bob's book is so helpful.
Recommend people at the time where people create a Word document.
They don't call it the meat grinder for nothing. The meat grinder is what we just lived through for the last 2 months.
So intimidating that they desperately want to just give somebody a Word document and say, which is kind of what you guys do.
Yeah, there's always going to be do-it-yourselfers.
Yeah, always.
But there's also a lot of people who, I just want to write, I don't want to have to worry about self-publishing.
Yes, a comment, I guess. I'd be a little cautious about using the word immortal to describe ebooks as an advantage, because Amazon really has a lot of control over what are out there and available to people. And I know that they have actually gotten with some of the really big publishers like Marcella That may not happen to a lot of the small indie actors, but that potential is there. But, you can't say that an ebook will be on the market forever. I think that would be unwise to tell a home.
But there are other ebook formats. You can have Kobo, you can have a
Right.
live book, and that's what we
Sure,
offer to the
sure.
is maybe instead of a book of available, you'll bring stuff.
Right, but I think a lot of authors, they only use them on India and Amazon, and if they get the sense it could be there forever, I just.
Well, the industry is constantly changing.
Well,
Right.
it is, but maybe my suggestion would be to be careful.
Sure, thank you.
That checklist was straight off of Paul Salvet's.
Okay.
These not my words. I just thought it sounded, poetic.
Anybody else?
Yes.
So if you're an author and you're working on your book in Word, is there any advantage to working on in Word versus Notepad or anything else? What would be the best if you had an author? I'm going to start my book. What should I start in?
I would just go ahead and start it in Word.
Well, there's other software out there. For example, there's Write It Now and there's Scrivener. There's things that are
Right.
specifically designed for people who are writing fiction novels, for example. And I believe Scrivener, they claim they can convert to ebooks. I haven't tried it, as we didn't get to that, to try it out.
They have code that makes their product.
Right. You could even start in InDesign for that matter. If you wanted to start writing in InDesign, you could.
So there's something to be said for track changes to start.
Yes,
Exactly.
That's true. And really, from an editor standpoint, I would prefer everybody work in Word.
Yeah, there really aren't a lot of shortcuts. So.
Anybody else? Great discussion, you guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming, everyone.